Okay, in this problem, we're going to talk about revenue. And before we start that, I just want to make sure everybody understands what revenue is. So revenue is the amount of money that you have after you sell whatever it is that you're selling. So it's not the same as profit. Revenue is just the amount of money that you get. So let's say you have a hot dog cart. It's already loaded with hot dogs, and you go out in front of school and you sell them. So if you sell 100 hot dogs at $2 a piece, how much money would you make? You would make $200, right? And if you sold 50 at $3, you would make 150. Okay, so how are we figuring that out? You're taking the amount that you sold and you're multiplying by the price that you sold it. So that's all revenue is revenue is equal to price times quantity, or quantity times price, either way. Okay, price times quantity. All right, so if you ever get confused about what revenue is, just come back to our little hot dog cart example and you should be able to remember how you figured that out. So over here on the left, this is how they have it worded in the book. And it says, remember, R equals X times P. So the price is P and the quantity is X. That's what they're telling you. Revenue is quantity times price, or price times quantity. Okay, so that's what they're reminding you there. So it says we've got price P and quantity X, and they give us a demand equation relating X and P. Okay, so that's the setup. The first part is to find a model that expresses the revenue R as a function of P. So what that means is they want us to write R with just P's. So they remind us that R is equal to X times P, okay, quantity times price, but we want just P. So if we want to write R just in terms of P, we're going to replace the X, we're going to replace the quantity with what we're given. So we would do negative 4P plus 600. So that's the X times P. Okay, and that's our revenue equation. We're going to want it multiplied out, so let's go ahead and do that now. So we'd have negative 4P squared plus 600P. All right, so that's our revenue equation. Okay, the next part, what is the domain of R? So we've talked about domain before, and if you look at this just in terms of the equation, then you would say that the domain is all reals because we can plug anything in for P and this equation will exist. But we're in a real world scenario now where these numbers mean something. We've got price and we've got revenue. And just like we saw before with another problem, you can't have negative price. And similarly, you can't have negative revenue. So I think they even give you that hint. They tell you R is non-negative, meaning that it can't be negative. So we can't have negative P, we can't have negative R. That changes the domain, or the implied domain, of what R can be. All right, so there are ways that you can figure this out algebraically. I think the best way to do this is to look at it graphically, and I'm not going to ask this on the test, but I think it's a useful experience for you guys to have in the homework. So it's in the homework, but it's not going to be on the test. So I would recommend for this that you use Desmos. Okay, you can use your graphing calculator as well, but Desmos is a lot easier to manage, and I'll show you that. Let's look at Desmos. Okay, so we're going to put our equation into Desmos, and I'm going to have to put it in as x's because it doesn't recognize P as a variable. Oops, hold on. Okay, so I put it into Desmos, and you're going to have to change the P's to X's just for this, because it only recognizes X as a variable. All right, and the problem that you're going to see here is the red is the function, and that's a problem because I don't see the whole thing. Remember, we should be seeing parabolas in this section. It's quadratics. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to adjust the zoom so that I can see the whole parabola. So you can kind of zoom in and out like that if you've got like a mouse that you can roll, or a touchpad that you can pinch or whatever, or you can use the controls on the side So I'm actually hitting there's a little wrench to the side. You can't see it because it's off the screen. But when you click on the wrench, you can see these controls. And what I can do is I can change the X values until I can see both sides of the parabola. So let's say I do 200. Here, let me click away from the wrench. You see the other side of the parabola now? We can see it. Okay, so now I can see both sides of the parabola, but I can't see the top. So we can change that. We're going to change our Y values. It's going to be something really big. 500 isn't big enough. Let's try 1500. Still not big enough. 15,000. Still not big enough. Let's try 25. So just play around with it. 25,000 for this one worked. Okay, so you're just going to play around with it until you find values that fit. I'm actually off the screen a little bit. Let me make that just a little bit bigger. I'm going to do 30,000. I can see it on my screen. Well, I can see it on my screen, but I know it's off of the viewing window for the recording. Okay, so now I can see the whole parabola, which is what I wanted. Okay, so that's what you're looking for, is just play around with it. You can do this on your calculator too with the window option, but it's a lot harder to do going back and forth trying to find it, and this isn't going to be on the test, so we're just trying to do an easy visual way here. Okay, now what was the question? What is the domain? So we know that revenue can't be negative, we know that price can't be negative. So when you look at this, the only part that makes sense is the part that's here in the first quadrant where everything's positive. So my domain would start here at 0, 0, and it would go to here at 150, 0. Okay, this is the only part of the graph that makes sense for the physical real world problem that we're in, is 0 to 150. Okay, so that's how you're going to find, if they ask you for the domain for these, put it in Desmos, scale it down to where you can see the whole window, and you're going to use the x-intercepts. Okay, and as long as we're here, I'm going to point out one more thing. Look right here. You can also see your vertex. Okay, we're going to see those numbers in just a minute. But I do want you to be able to, you're not going to be able to use Desmos on the test, so I do want you to be able to solve these, but do note that you, as long as you're using Desmos in the homework, you can check your answers here as well, because remember, we're going to use the vertex to find our solution. Okay, so let's go back to our problem now, and remember that our domain is 0 to 150. 0 to 150. Okay, so we can write that as 0 to 150, or we can write it as 0 to 150. I think my math lab has it set up as an inequality for this one, but either way, you're just putting in the 0 and the 150. Okay, so now moving on to the next part. What price P maximizes the revenue, and what is the maximum revenue? So these are the two key questions for this section. And when you see maximum, you're going to think vertex, and you're going to think negative b over 2a. Okay, so you're going to do negative b over 2a, and then you're going to plug it back in. So they've got this broken up for you in 2 steps. You're going to do negative b over 2a and plug it back in. So when you do negative b over 2a, you're doing the variable. Our variable for this one is p. And when you plug it back in, you're doing the function, and our function for this one is r. Okay, so b and a are right here. There's our a, and there's our b. So we're going to do negative 600 over 2 times negative 4, and I'm going to put the parentheses around my whole denominator so that doesn't get messed up in the calculator. And when we do 600 over 8, we get 75. Okay, so we get 75. And then so that's the price that we need to set to hit our maximum revenue, and then we plug that back in. So we plug 75 into our revenue, and we get negative 475 squared plus 600 times 75. We do all of that, and we should get 22,500. Okay, and those two numbers should look familiar because that was our vertex, right? This was our variable number, and this was our y. This was our x number, and this was our y number. So our variable and our function value. Okay, so those come straight from the vertex. There's one I don't have on here, but I think they ask for one and they say, how many would you sell or what is the quantity? I didn't see it in the one that I looked at, but I think it is in there in one. And to answer that one, you would come back up here to this one. This is the only thing that we know about quantity. And we would use the price that we need to set. So we need to set this to $75 to hit our maximum revenue. So that tells us what we need for our quantity. We plug that into here. Okay, so we plug 75 into there. And we would get, let me figure that out real quick, 300. So we would have to sell 300 units, 300 items, whatever this is, to hit our maximum revenue of $22.50. Okay, so that's pretty much it for revenue, and we'll move on to one of the other problems.